Greetings, Massive. Who are some of the important and influential people who we have met over our life's journey and who have helped to shape the individuals who we are today? Hi, I am Lascelles Butchgad Chen from the Greetings Massive Show, coming to you live on Jamaicans.com from East Africa with a very special guest for today. But before we begin today's show, I want to give a shout out to my good brother Omari and his wife Sipe, who own and operate iCurio craft shop in Moshi, Tanzania. They also have nice hotels and facilities to take care of you when you're in Moshi. So please stop by iCurio shops in Moshi, Tanzania. You know, I have lived in South Sudan. And South Sudan, when I was there, they had labeled it a post-conflict region. I was there to do microfinance, and I did microfinance there for about 2.5 years. Now, in my trip there, I was very privileged to meet someone who has become a very good friend of mine, Ken. Mr. Ken Miller. Now, the story actually it's comical because Ken knew me before I knew Ken. And that was because we were playing reggae music in Nairobi. So here I am in Juba. I get a message. This guy wants to meet me. Bam, bam. Here is Ken Miller. And we meet up in Juba. And I can tell you honestly, my experience in Juba, my time in Juba was much, nice. It was a nice experience. And I know because Ken was my neighbor. We ended up living in the same place, next door. So he's become a very good friend of mine. We shared a wall, yes. So Ken,
very thin wall.
Ken, welcome to the show. And this show is really a blessing, so I want to give you a chance to tell the audience about your experience in East Africa and specifically what you have done in South Sudan. I know we hear a lot of bad news every day, and I know I'm expecting you to just give us a sprinkling of hope because Africa is our home and we want to see all the countries prosper. Welcome, Ken. Nice to see you.
Lovely. Thanks, Lascelles, or as I knew you, I think it was 1988 in Nairobi when our paths first met. You were a Jabuch, and you rocked up in Nairobi, the Iqbal Hotel, with a serious selection of cassette music, some of the finest reggae a person could hear. And at that time, in those days, I was pounding pavement, selling vinyl. This was the days before compact disc. So I used to bring in vinyl from the UK, mostly reggae. In fact, in those days, it was just reggae music, which was hard for me to find in Scotland. I used to go down to London, pick up some vinyl, and then bring it over to Kenya and distribute it to the different sound systems and the nightclubs and so forth.
Which sound systems?
Try and get enough.
Which sound systems were operating at that time?
Okay, there were a number. There was.
This is Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi.
Nairobi, 1988. There was Dread Brothers.
All right.
There was Papa Biggie, Papa Davis. The late. There was later on Congoni Sounds, Mandevu. And from that, there was Jambo Sounds, Jackie Marley, Man Apollo.
You have the history kid.
There was Jabras. And of course, you had your sound, which was
King David.
What was the name of it? Can you even remember?
King David sound.
The King David sound, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, King Lion. They were my biggest customer. They were the bouncer guys from Hollywood nightclub that set up their own machine. They used to sell cassette to the minibus drivers. So whenever you went on a minibus trip, you were listening to some hot reggae. Anyway, that was in the 80s. I think you were a house husband then. Funnily enough, many years later, I believe it was 2010 or 2009?
Yeah, 8, 9, those times. Yeah, 2008,
2008. Yeah. Yeah, there was a Kenyan lady friend of mine where I worked. She said, Ken, you like reggae? There's a Jamaican man in town. And I heard, who? Lascelles Chen? I said, hey, that must be Jabuch, King David sounds. So, yeah, I said, I want to meet that man. It's been many, many years, 20 years, in fact. So we link up, and yeah, you were staying at the riverside on the Nile, and so was I. So we reconnected, and then we became neighbors. You moved in next door. We shared a wall. So my story is, I'm from Scotland, and I came to Kenya first time in '87, and met a Kenyan lady, fell in love, had a son, and I suddenly realized selling reggae music wasn't going to pay the bills. So I looked for a job, and I went to South Sudan as a turnboy on a truck in 1994. Then I got a job distributing food for people during the war. That time they had a war with the North, with Khartoum. So I did that, and then I joined a Norwegian organization who were working to promote human rights and justice and dignity and freedom for the South Sudanese people. So I'd worked with them from 95 up until 2009, which was very interesting because unlike so many of the other organizations which had to get permission from Khartoum, from the guys in North Sudan, if you need to go there, there's been fighting or there's been famine, they had to get clearance from the North. But with us, we just worked alongside, they were known as rebels those days, now they're the government. After the independence of South Sudan in 2011, 9th of July. And we had great hopes that Africa's youngest country was going to stand up strong and firm on its feet from their independence. And of course, as you say, we hear a lot of bad news, a lot of sad news, but there's still hope. There are very good people, warm people. They'll share the little they have. And I think we had a lot of good experience meeting the South Sudanese.
Yeah. Well, for the viewers, I was in South Sudan doing microfinance. I had a job with the World Bank. So I was going from state to state. How many states, Ken? 10 or 12? I don't remember at that time. I think
10.
It's about 10, yeah.
Yeah, there's 10 states.
You could not drive out of Juba, you had to fly. So I was flying from Juba to Yambio, from Juba to wherever. And I can tell all of the states.
Wow.
And I can tell the viewers,
Yeah.
there is no prettier country than South Sudan. No country that I have lived in has so much water, so much forest, so much wild animals. It was, when you fly over a place, you really get a perspective. But what I like with Ken is that he was doing a lot of work on the ground, working with the people. Ken, which was your, if you can remember, 'cause you have a long memory, which was the most hair-raising experience that man, I have to get out of this place quickly?
Well, there were many.
I'm
so
sure.
many. But I'll tell you, well, I suppose the first time we were bombed. So the SPLA under John Garang, the late Dr. John Garang by then.
Where was this?
They got a little help from their friends in the region to push back the forces from Khartoum. And during that operation to recapture maybe 1/3 of the countryside from the forces in Khartoum, we ended up in a town called Ye. Oh, Ye. Beautiful place on the border, but very close to Uganda and Zaire, or as it's now known, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thickly forested area, rivers, orchards, grain fields, a lot of potential. And the guys up north in Khartoum, they weren't so happy when they lost control of that town. So what they did was they used to send in their cargo planes to drop bombs.
Wow.
Nowhere near the front line where the war was, but behind the front line, 60 miles to the southeast in the town of Ye. And at that time, I worked with Norwegian People's Aid. We had a health program, so we were working in the hospital in Ye. And one morning, the plane comes over and we could hear it. It's high altitude, way up in the sky, but a very distinctive sound. An old Russian Antonov. You could tell by the sound of the engines, this wasn't friendly traffic. So we ran and we took cover. One of the first things we did was to dig foxholes or bomb shelters. And that particular time, this thing released, just as you can imagine, they opened the ramp and they used to roll out barrel bombs, 500 pounders. Some of them had barometric fuses, others just incendiary devices. Anyway, this time it got a direct hit in the hospital. And sadly, one of the bombs landed next to the pediatric and maternity ward, and it knocked out the bomb shelter, and it collapsed. You know, we'd excavated and then taken big teak logs, covered it, put soil so it wasn't visible from the air. But just as fortune had it, one of these bombs landed on top of that, and it collapsed, and 17 people died inside. They were asphyxiated. There was no oxygen. And for those of us that were in the neighboring bomb shelter, we survived. And it just makes me think, you know, how close you can come to death. Yeah. So there was that experience. There was other times we were ambushed by the Lord's Resistance Army. There was other time we got chased by a helicopter gunship. Wow. So it was a real relief, Butch. You know, after the peace deal in 2005, suddenly nothing bad came from the sky. Just a bit of rainfall to keep the crops growing. And then, as you said, those days there had been no road maintenance for maybe 20 years. So we were involved in road construction projects, connecting the towns to the villages, opening up for services to come, for schools to be reopened, for health centers to work, for trade goods to come into the markets. So it was a real relief, you know, when the first war ended.
Mm. You know, in Jamaica, we use the word tribalism to refer to the conflict between the political parties. You know, in Jamaica, we have the PNP and the JLP, and they have their garrisons, and it's a historical scar on Jamaica, very bad scar. And I want you to talk a little bit about your experience of tribalism in Africa as you have moved around. For the audience, people like Ken and myself, less me, but more Ken, we have a word we say mzungu. Now mzungu it just means pale. And some people take it badly, some of those people just laugh it off and think. But somebody like Ken, um, you would find that over the years he would gather a certain opinion from his perspective, if you understand what I'm saying, because he's looking at it from a broad perspective as somebody of experience and understanding that, yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but how do we deal with this issue of tribalism? Because I remember, Ken, when I was there, you ask somebody, what problem do you have with that person? And they cannot tell you. They just tell you they don't like them. So, Ken, please give your insight so that the viewers can understand what tribalism really is in your experience in Africa.
Well, I mean, we know about tribalism in Europe. We know about tribalism in the so-called United Kingdom, which is now the divided kingdom. And I know about, tribalism from going to football matches as a kid in Scotland. You know, when Edinburgh's team was playing against Glasgow's team, that was a form of tribalism. But what would happen when Hibs from Glasgow would play, Hibs, my team from Edinburgh, would play Rangers from Glasgow. It was along religious lines, it was along geographical lines. Edinburgh's in the east, Glasgow's in the west. It could come from very silly reasons underlying it. Yeah. But then I learned early on when there was a football match between Scotland and England, it didn't matter if you supported Hibs or Rangers, you came from Edinburgh, Glasgow, you were all Scottish. You united on the terraces against the English. And coming as a teenager, as I was when I first came to Kenya, I used to hear this word, muzungu, muzungu. Muzungu is from the Kiswahili word for kuzunguka. It means to move around. So the Muzungus were those people who used to move around a lot, and the locals didn't understand. What are you here for? Later they would say, it's to take our land, to take our resources. You're not here moving around for the right reasons. You're just Muzungu, Muzunguka. And coming to South Sudan, or Sudan as it was at that time when we were there together, I used to hear another word, kawaja, kawaja. And that was a white man. In Ethiopia, they call it fereji. Because they used to see the first Europeans were the French, and they pronounced it as fereji. And everybody who's white is a fereji. So a kawaja, even you, Butch, you are half kawaja. Because compared with the average South Sudanese, you're a pale-skinned man.
I was stopped as a northerner.
Anyway, or an Arab, yeah.
Hey, I was stopped as an Arab until I opened my mouth.
Yeah. And then they ask you, which English is that you're speaking?
Yeah.
So this kind of tribalism, it's found all over the place, and it's difficult to understand, especially, the conflict that hit South Sudan in 2013 December. It was a real tragedy. The world's newest born nation, just the baby country, learning to crawl before it walks, before it runs. The two largest ethnic groups, the Dinka and the Nuer, ended up in a confusion, and fighting broke out because of misunderstanding between the leaders. And it doesn't really matter which one was right, which one was wrong, left or right hand. It's just the common people that suffered the most, as usual. I guess it's the same in Jamaica.
Yeah, poor people suffer.
The politics, always the same. So I'm not sure we're going to see a solution very quickly about it, but of course there's been a lot of hostility because of what happened in the past. Your grandfather raided my cattle camp, took my cattle. Or your uncle came in and took my sheep and goats. Or you planted your spear outside my sister's house. And, these are domestic issues which get blown up into national issues. And of course, the challenge is when you've had so many cheap automatic weapons flooding into Africa, especially after the end of the Soviet Union, guns are everywhere. And instead of sitting down and having a conversation and using those traditional mechanisms, things escalate quickly. And, the sound of gunfire and violence for no reason. But those are the bad stories you hear. They're not really typical experiences. There were so many other warm-hearted, good-natured people who put aside our differences, whether they're physical differences, whether they're spiritual differences, religion, or political differences. The vast majority of times, people want to live in harmony, but it doesn't take much to light that fire.
Because of the history.
And there's so much of the history and the politricks. The politicians being too self-centered and having their own interest. As they say, in Africa, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers.
Yeah.
It's the grass that gets crushed.
Ken, I wanted to hear your opinion. I saw a report the other day about some elders who met, and they are complaining that it is better that these two leaders leave for the process to move forward, because they figure if these two leaders stay around, peace will never come. What is your I'm sure you have heard that, you have seen that report. What is your opinion on that?
Well, to be honest, my brother, I'm planning to go back to South Sudan next week. I'm in Uganda right now.
I know, that's why we're having the interview. I know your bloodline is there.
So the fact that I'm going back next week, I have to be careful what I say.
Yeah.
Because if the wrong people hear you saying or the right people hear you saying the wrong thing, or the wrong people hear you saying the right thing, you know what? You can wind up in a lot of trouble.
Well,
but I would approach it from another angle. I'd look at it like this. There's a huge task at hand. There's a long road ahead. And we have to appreciate it's been through the contribution of many that the flag for the independent country went up in July 2011. It's almost 10 years ago, after decades of struggle. So I would rather look at it as maybe, I know Jamaica has great relay running teams, the sprinters. Sometime the time comes, you have to pass the baton on. Usain Bolt was the world leader for a time, but then somebody will come after him. And they have to be ready to pass on the baton and say, we've done our best, we tried our hardest, but make space for the younger generation. They may have a different approach, a different outlook, some fresh ideas. But it's difficult when you've grown up in war, and war is what you're used to. It's not easy to change that mindset. But I think, it's about time to give chances to others and create the political space for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, as you rightly say, Ken, the South Sudanese people are loving people. I spent 2.5 years there, and it was very nice moving around, doing everything. Of course, the security situation was there, but made friends very easily, very easily. Um,
That's true.
yeah. No, I know you have been some places in South Sudan, Ken, which no camera has been. No reporter
Yeah.
has found in means to go to those places. Myself, I have one memory, but I will ask you to give your first memory of a place which just really blew your mind in South Sudan.
Well, there's a few. One
I'm
of them
sure.
was when I went to the Nuba Mountains. And the Nuba Mountains, actually, it's in North Sudan. It's in southern Kordofan.
Mm.
And photographers had been there way back. Lenny Riefenstahl was there. George Rogers was there. There was famous pictures of the Nuba wrestlers.
Uh-huh.
So let me think of the place in South Sudan. Then one place springs to mind, and that is way over west
Mm-hmm.
on the border with Ethiopia, an area called Boma. And we were there. It was in 1996, and we flew in on an old DC-3, probably older than my grandfather, flown by a Colombian pilot who liked swearing in Spanish. And when we got to the airstrip, he just shook his head and said, they've given me the wrong coordinates. Anyway, he finally put the plane down. We offloaded. We were taking some fishing equipment, some hooks and thread, because that area is blessed. There's a big mountain, the Boma Plateau. There's a lot of seasonal streams, a lot of fish. We had some agricultural inputs, sorghum seeds, some hoes or malodas for the community there, just to make it a bit easier for them to farm.
Which,
And
who are you working with? Which NGO?
I was with Norwegian People's Aid,
Norwegian People's Aid.
NPA.
Okay.
That's the one. Otherwise known as
Are they
Norwegian People's Army.
are they still there in South Sudan now?
They are, yes. They're
Okay,
still
well,
active.
let's say big up NPA.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I celebrate that organization. It was 15 years of my life.
Yeah,
Great
big up.
times.
Yeah.
So finally, when everything had been offloaded, put to the store, one of my colleagues was arranging the distribution. I was with a gentleman called Luca Byong, and he was working for the humanitarian wing of government, the so-called rebel movement. And he said, this mountain is a meeting place for many different tribes. The Murle are here, the Topoza are nearby, the Jie, round the back of the mountain, the Nyangatom, the Dasanech, and the army that was there, they were known as the rebels at that time. They were from all over the country, all different tribes of the 47 tribes. And Luca said to me, there's one tribe of South Sudanese who I've never met, and this is our chance to go and meet them. And I
Oh.
asked him, who are they? He said, these are the Kashipo. And they're close relatives of the Surma and the Mursi, who live in southwest Ethiopia, along the side of the Omo River,
Mm-hmm.
which actually has its source not far from Shashamani in Ethiopia. And at that stage, they call it the Gilo.
Gilo River.
Sorry, not the Gilo, but they dammed it recently. There's the Gibe Dam, series of dams. And that river flows into northern Kenya, into Lake Turkana.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So he asked me, are you interested? We go for a walk. And the great thing in Sudan in general, if you ask somebody when you start a journey, and you come in like with our the Western concept. How far is it?
Yeah.
And Lucas said, he told me, you need to learn Juba Arabic. Let me teach you. Ma, it's not far, it's Garib. It means it's near. I said, okay. So we packed up, we started walking. And we walked, and then that night we literally just bivouacked under the stars. We had a plastic sheet which we lay down, and we slept in our clothes because it was quite high up around the edge of this mountain. Got chilly in the night. And then you don't need an alarm in the morning because that morning chill wakes you up when you snap out of it. So the next day we walked. And these are military men with long legs. I'm 6'2", but these guys were all taller than me, and they were used to the bush life. So we walked and we walked another 12 hours. We were going from sunrise to sunset, but you stop for a couple of hours when the heat of the sun is too much. Between 11 and 3 o'clock, you can't move. So that night, and I'm asking, are you sure the Kashipo really exist? Does this tribe exist? He said, yeah, just be patient. And I said, how far is it? He said, it's Garib. And the tone of his voice would go higher and higher. It's Garib. It's very close. And on the third day, we were met by some of the hills, and they also keep cattle, the agro-pastoralists. They don't have big herds of cattle, but they keep a few cows for milking and for bride price. And that was really, really a wonderful experience because we were taken into the heart of the village, or one of the many villages. And Luca asked the headman or the chief, when did you last see a Kawaja here? And he said, we used to go very long walk to that airstrip where you've come from. So we've seen Kawajas there every 6 months. They come in the dry season, sometimes with food, sometimes with seeds and tools, sometimes with mosquito nets, different things. But he said, no, we haven't had anyone in this village. I used to hear about it from my father. And that was in the 1940s. When the Ethiopians were being chased from Abyssinia, from Ethiopia. So that was a special experience to think I'd been somewhere that in half a century, another Kawaja hadn't set foot. So that was very special.
Yeah, it must have been. One of my experiences is in Awel. You know Awel?
Awel, yeah.
Awel, yes. I went there on an assignment and I met the original Ras Corby. He was doing a show. He was doing a show there, so we were entertained. Now the next day he invited me to go and meet one of the chiefs because that's his place.
Yeah.
He took me to a place called Bongo. Now that place, it has a wide river, and the shore of the river is white sand, like what we have in Negril in Jamaica, white sand. Wow. I walked from one end of that place to the next and back. It took 1 hour. So this is just a fantastic place. Now, the chief told us two interesting things. When I told him that there are people in Jamaica who call themselves Bongo, he said, well, those people come from this place.
Gordon?
Yeah.
Come and say hi.
Hey! Gordon is there. Hey.
Come out. So you were with the Bongo?
Yes, so he
talking about
said
the Bongo.
we should tell those people that they came from there. So I asked him, how did they come from here? So he told me that in those early days, they used to take slaves from there. People catch people from there and take them to the riverside. Hi, how are you? How is Kampala?
Kampala is boring. I want to go to Cape Town.
Okay, bye.
He wants to go to Cape Town.
Cape Town, yeah. So he was telling me that this was one of the source places for slaves. So they would take them to the river and chain them to the baobab tree. And when the Arabs were coming with the slave ships up the river, they pick them, they carry them to Central African Republic, they walk them down to Zaire River, and then they take them to the Atlantic. So that is when as the first time I actually heard a story from an elder of a place that slaves were taken from. Then he told me another story. He said that there's a celebration in that location once a year where the river has so much fish, the people go and catch the fish with their hands. Wow, I mean, and it wasn't that he was just telling me like a fact of life, because when we were there, he got fish and was roasting them. So we had roast fish and cassava and whatever. So he said, you must come back for the festival. So I said, which festival? He said, there's a festival that they keep, and people just walk into the river and catch the fish with their hands. So I turned to Rascorby, and Rascorby said, yes, it's true. So that was one of my good memories of South Sudan. Yeah, many interesting things in South Sudan. Tell us about the elephants. I know you know about the elephants in South Sudan, Ken. Tell us about those elephants, because you have been around that place.
Yes, in fact, just on the edge of the Boma Massif, the mountain where the Boma Plateau is, they think it's possibly the largest migration of animals in the world. The white-eared cob and the tiang. Those are savanna antelopes. And there are more animals migrating in that circuit than the wildebeest between the Serengeti in Tanzania and the Masai Mara in Kenya. And also more
Give us the
than the
geography of that
caribou.
place. Give us the geography of that place, Ken.
So this is from the east bank of the River Nile all the way over to the Ethiopian border to the west. And from the Ethiopian border, the river systems they're draining from the Ethiopian highlands. That's the Gilo River, the Akobo River, the Baro River, which form the Sobat. So you have this huge, thinly populated, in terms of human population, from the River Nile, north of Juba, all the way to Bor, which is almost 200 kilometers. The whole land to the west is where this migration takes place. And they basically move in a circle according to availability of grass and water. When it dries up in the dry season, they move. And there was a documentary made about it called Mysterious Journey by Yorkshire Television back in the late 70s or early 80s.
Wow.
Because these things come and then they move, and nobody really knew where they came from or where they're going to. But that's their migration. And in the midst of that area, there are also elephants. Those are savanna elephants. And surprisingly, despite the wars, the people there, they value them in their culture and in the oral tradition. So unless you really needed to kill that beast, to kill the elephant to eat, you left it. Despite the fact it may have ivory on its tusk, they respected the elephants. So they have survived through decades of war. And then also, very interestingly, far to the, I was saying to the west, it's the east of the Nile River, heading east to
East of the
Ethiopia.
Nile River, yes, towards Ethiopia.
But now in the extreme west of the, that's east of the Nile River. But on the west side of the Nile, in the southwest corner,
Yambio.
where South Yambio and even further west towards Ezo and Tombara. And then from there you head north to Wau.
Mm-hmm.
And in that area there are believed to be much smaller elephants. And these are the forest elephants.
Uh-huh.
Because there it's tropical forest and heavily wooded areas, as the savanna has thinned, has changed into a denser vegetation, and the elephants there are smaller, and they're linked to the elephants that come from the Garamba Park in northern Congo, and also the elephants from the Central African Republic. So there's a whole wonderful mix of wildlife there. The bongo. There's also the animal, the bongo. Beautifully marked animal. And these things have been lost because of the breakdown in communication and the wars. But we hope the day will come when the politics will no longer be politricks. It will actually be something for the betterment of all the citizens.
True.
So there's still a lot of hope.
You know, I've always liked to talk to you because you're a man of hope. You know, sometimes we see things, they look a bit stressful, but it's always good to have hope. And on the line of hope, tell us what you are doing in South Sudan now, because I know you're a busy man. You say you're going there shortly. What you have going on in South Sudan?
Well, what I do now, I've gone full circle from my humanitarian life there for 17 years. I went private. I joined with two colleagues of mine, one from Norway and the other from Eritrea, an engineer. We have a construction company. And our motto was helping build the new nation. So we're building schools, health clinics, low-cost housing. To be honest, that hasn't done so well because the war of December 2013, and then the second war of 2016 July. So my main focus now is on water, sanitation, and hygiene. Trying to minimize the destruction caused by waterborne diseases.
True.
So we do distribution of water purification products. That's my main activity now. We distribute that through the government agencies and through some of the UN organizations and some of the non-governmental organizations, both the international ones like Save the Children or Oxfam, and then also through national South Sudanese organizations. Water is life, and
Of course.
it's one of the most enjoyable things to be involved with, because you know every liter of clean drinking water has an impact.
Yeah. Ken, I want to thank you so much for your time today, because I'm sure the viewers,
Thank you.
I'm sure the viewers now have a different insight into South Sudan. Just to add a little humor at the end, Ken and I used to have sound clash in Juba.
Right.
So we have some little small equipment and we go to a place, play some music and have some fun. But Ken really made my stay in South Sudan more enjoyable. I know I had a good neighbor. Invite him over Sunday morning, Saturday morning for breakfast. Always have a meal ready because he had some funny hours. He would just come at any time, knock on the door, say, yeah, food is there.
Uh-huh.
And he was always welcome. Plus, he introduced me to some very, very nice people, like our landlord, Holger,
Yeah.
and Papa Beer, and
Mhm.
what was the name of that singer? Remind me, Ken, who used to live on the right side there in the tent. Our singer friend. What was his name? Um,
Oh, yeah. There were many of the musicians, but
yeah,
you're right. I'm glad you remind me of the Sound Clash because we used to call it Scotland, Jamaica, the Lions of Juba.
yes, yes, yes. So thank you very much, Ken, and I'm going to leave you with the last word. Just to let the viewers know how hopeful you are because you are there. Some signs that you may have seen that give you some confidence that South Sudan will not fall apart. It will move forward and the people will prosper. Tell us some of the signs that you have seen and you can wind up the show.
Well, the signs are there's hope in the young generation. They've seen and witnessed firsthand, so they have experience that conflict isn't the way forward. So you have to remain optimistic in the youth and the next generation. They won't repeat the mistakes that they've witnessed themselves. And of course, that's it, the humanity that's there. And it's a land of opportunity. Of course, you always expect when a newborn tries to move, there have to be a few accidents and a few falls before they take their first steady steps. And that's what's happened. And yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Okay.
Things will be good. And we look forward to some of your audience when they get the chance to come and see the marvels that lie in that country.
No, I'm telling you, the place is just fabulous, man. Fabulous. Anyhow, Ken, thanks again. Have a good evening.
Thanks a lot. One love.
God
All the
bless, my
best.
boss. God bless.
Yes.